When we picture the Roman Empire, what comes to mind? Mighty legions marching in perfect formation, the Colosseum standing tall against the sky, powerful emperors ruling over a vast territory. We celebrate their incredible roads, their revolutionary legal system, and their engineering marvels that still stand today. History loves to tell the stories of Roman glory and conquest, but behind every celebrated victory, there's a darker, quieter story that often gets left out of the history books. It's a story of immense human cost, a silent tragedy that followed in the wake of Roman expansion. After every major conquest, after the battles were won and the banners were raised, thousands of women were captured. They were swept up from their homes and lives, becoming part of a hidden system of control and forced labor that powered the empire from behind the scenes. Think about the sheer scale of this. Some historical estimates suggest that after just one large military campaign, tens of thousands of women could be taken captive. The number 25,000, for instance, isn't just a statistic from a single event. It represents a devastating pattern that repeated itself time and time again, across centuries and continents, wherever the Roman eagle flew. These women weren't just numbers on a ledger. They were individuals with their own stories, families, and dreams. They were mothers, daughters, artisans, and community leaders. One day they were living their lives, and the next, they were treated as spoils of war. Torn from everything they knew, they were forced into a new and often brutal reality within Roman society. Their identities were stripped away, replaced by the label of captive. This was the unseen price of building an empire, a human cost that was systematically ignored. So, what happened to these women? Their fates were varied, but rarely easy. Many were sold in slave markets, their value determined by their age, health, and skills. They might end up in wealthy Roman households, working as domestic servants, weavers, or caregivers for Roman children. Their days would be filled with endless, grueling tasks, from dawn until dusk, with no freedom and no rights. Others were forced into even harsher conditions, sent to work in the empire's mines or on large agricultural estates known as lati. The labor was backbreaking, and life expectancy was tragically short. It's crucial to understand that these women were not passive victims. Within the rigid constraints of their captivity, they found ways to resist, to survive, and to preserve a part of themselves. They held onto their languages, their cultural traditions, and their beliefs as best they could. They formed bonds with other captives, creating new, fragile communities in the heart of the empire that had destroyed their old ones. They whispered stories of their homelands to the children they raised, planting seeds of their heritage in a foreign land. Their resilience is a powerful testament to the human spirit's ability to endure, even in the most unimaginable circumstances. By focusing only on the grand monuments and the famous battles, we get a very incomplete picture of Rome. We miss the vast, complex human engine that kept it all running. The stories of these captured women force us to look beyond the marble statues and see the flesh and blood reality of empire. Their experiences reveal the deep contradictions at the heart of Roman civilization, a society that produced brilliant philosophy and law, yet was built upon the subjugation of countless individuals. Acknowledging their story isn't about diminishing Roman achievements. It's about understanding the full, complex, and often painful truth of how that world was made. It reminds us that history is not just a story of winners, but also a story of those who paid the price. Have you ever wondered how Rome, once a small city-state, grew into one of the most powerful empires in history? It wasn't an overnight success story. Rome's expansion was a slow, deliberate, and often brutal process that unfolded over centuries. It was a relentless march of legions, a complex web of alliances, and a series of strategic invasions that reshaped the ancient world. Let's explore how this incredible transformation happened. Rome's journey began with its neighbors. The early Romans were constantly at war, first with other Latin tribes, then with the Etruscans to the north and the Samnites to the south. Each victory wasn't just about survival. It was about growth. Conquered lands were absorbed, and defeated peoples were often integrated into the Roman system, sometimes as citizens, sometimes as allies. This unique approach of turning former enemies into partners provided Rome with a growing pool of manpower for its armies, and a buffer against future threats. This strategy set the stage for Rome's dominance over the entire Italian peninsula. With Italy secured, Rome's ambition turned outward, leading to the legendary Punic Wars against Carthage. These weren't just battles. They were epic struggles for control of the Mediterranean. For over a century, these two superpowers clashed in massive naval battles and grueling land campaigns. The genius of generals like Hannibal brought Rome to the brink of collapse, but Roman resilience and determination ultimately won the day. The destruction of Carthage gave Rome control over key territories like Sicily, Sardinia, and parts of Spain and North Africa. The Mediterranean Sea, once a contested space, was on its way to becoming what the Romans would call Mare Nostrum, our sea. As Rome's power grew, its legions marched east and north. They conquered the Hellenistic kingdoms of Greece and Macedonia, absorbing their rich culture and knowledge. Roman generals like Julius Caesar pushed the frontiers into Gaul, what is now modern-day France, in a series of brilliant but bloody campaigns. His conquests brought immense wealth and territory to Rome, but also set the stage for the end of the Roman Republic and the rise of the empire. From the misty forests of Britain to the desert sands of Egypt and Syria, Roman armies seemed unstoppable. Each conquest brought a flood of new resources into Rome. Gold, silver, grain, and exotic goods poured into the capital, fueling an unprecedented economic boom. But the most significant spoils of war were the people. Millions were captured and brought back to Roman lands. These captives became a crucial, if tragic, part of the Roman economy. Men captured in war faced a grim future. Many were forced into hard labor, building the monumental roads, aqueducts, and temples that still stand today. They toiled in mines, extracting the precious metals that funded the empire, or worked vast agricultural estates called latifuni. The strongest and most defiant were often sent to the gladiator schools, forced to fight for the entertainment of the Roman public. Some were even conscripted into auxiliary units of the Roman army, ironically, forced to help expand the very empire that had conquered them. For women, the experience was different, but no less harrowing. They were not typically sent to the mines or the gladiator arenas. Instead, they were considered valuable for domestic labor. Captured women became servants, cooks, and weavers in the households of wealthy Romans. Their lives were dictated by the whims of their masters. Beyond labor, they were valued for their ability to bear children. Their offspring would be born into servitude, perpetuating the system and increasing their owner's wealth and social standing. Owning numerous servants, particularly those from exotic, far-off lands, was a major status symbol in Roman society. So, the rise of Rome was a story written in conflict and conquest. From a small town on the Tiber River, it expanded through strategic warfare and a unique ability to assimilate conquered peoples. The wealth and labor of a vast and diverse population, much of it involuntary, built the foundation of an empire that would dominate. Throughout history, we often hear tales of glorious conquest, of brave soldiers earning medals and showered with rewards. But have you ever stopped to think about the other side of that story? For the ordinary people, the civilians living in a city under siege, conquest wasn't about glory. It was a terrifying reality of fear, profound loss, and a future shrouded in uncertainty. Imagine the moment a city's defenses finally crumble. The triumphant shouts of the victors echo through the streets. But for the residents, it's the sound of their world falling apart. Chaos erupts instantly. Families who were together just moments before are torn apart in the confusion. A mother loses her child's hand in a stampeding crowd. A husband is separated from his wife, unsure if he will ever see her again. Panic spreads like wildfire as people scramble for safety. But there are few places left to hide. The streets that once held bustling markets and children's laughter become scenes of devastation. Homes, filled with memories and personal treasures, are looted and destroyed. The very concept of a safe haven vanishes. People try desperately to escape the city walls, hoping to find refuge in the countryside. But escape routes are often cut off. Many attempts to flee end in failure, leaving them trapped within the conquered city, at the mercy of the new powers. In the aftermath of the fighting, a new, grim order begins to take shape. For the women of the conquered city, the situation was particularly dire. They were often systematically rounded up, gathered together, and treated not as individuals, but as spoils of war. Their agency was completely stripped away. They had no say in what would happen to them next. Their entire future, their very lives, depended entirely on the whims of others' own, who would claim them as property, who would purchase them in a market, or who would be assigned control over their fate. This wasn't an abstract concept. It was a lived experience for countless women throughout history. Their identities as mothers, daughters, artisans, or community leaders were erased, replaced by a new status, defined solely by their conquerors. They were moved from place to place, their ties to their homeland, their families, and their past severed completely. This process of dehumanization was a calculated part of conquest, a way to break the spirit of the defeated population and assert total dominance. When we study history, it's crucial to look beyond the grand narratives of battles and generals. We must remember the human cost, the stories of the civilians whose lives were irrevocably shattered. By understanding their plight, we gain a fuller, more compassionate perspective on the true nature of conflict. It reminds us that behind every medal and every monument, there are countless untold stories of suffering and resilience that deserve to be heard. Thank you for watching. And if you found, what was it like to be a captive woman in ancient Rome? The answer is a somber reflection of the times. In Roman society, the legal and social framework was built around the concept of paterfamiliasta, head of the household, always a man who held absolute authority over his family and property. Women, even Roman citizens, existed within this structure, subordinate to their fathers, husbands, or guardians. For captive women, this existing system made their integration into Roman life tragically seamless. When a woman was captured during a military campaign, she was stripped of her freedom, her identity, and her previous life. She became spoils of war, a piece of property, whose like gold, livestock, or land. She could be sold in a marketplace, traded between powerful men, or given as a gift to seal an alliance or reward loyalty. Her value was determined not by her humanity, but by her skills, her appearance, and her health. Once acquired, a captive woman's life could take many different paths, none of which she could choose for herself. Many were destined for a life of hard labor. In urban households, they would work as domestic servants, cooking, cleaning, weaving, and caring for the children of their masters. On sprawling agricultural estates, or latifundia, they would toil in the fields under the hot sun, their lives consumed by grueling physical work from sunrise to sunset. The conditions were often harsh, and their existence was entirely dependent on the whims of their owner. Others, particularly those noted for their beauty or special talents, might be trained for different roles. They could become entertainers, musicians, dancers, or singers forced to perform at the lavish banquets and private parties of the Roman elite. Their purpose was to provide pleasure and amusement, their own feelings and desires completely disregarded. Some were forced to become companions or concubines, their bodies not their own, existing solely for the pleasure of their masters. While this might have offered a life with more material comfort compared to a field laborer, it came at the cost of profound personal violation and a complete lack of agency. For the wealthiest and most powerful Romans, owning captive women was more than just a matter of practical labor or personal pleasure. It was a status symbol, displaying women from conquered lands, women who were once free, perhaps even of high status in their own societies, was a potent demonstration of a Romang's military success, his wealth, and his influence. These women were living trophies, paraded in triumphs, their presence a constant, visible reminder of Rome's imperial might and the owner's place within that power structure. Think about the psychological toll. These women were torn from their homes, their families, and their cultures. They were forced to learn a new language, new customs, and a new brutal reality where they were no longer people, but possessions. Their previous lives were erased, and their futures were dictated entirely by others. Yet, within this oppressive system, we find flickers of human resilience. Some managed to find ways to survive, to form bonds with other enslaved people, and to preserve a small part of their identity against overwhelming odds. Their stories, though often lost to history, are a crucial part of understanding the complex and often brutal reality of the Roman world. The fate of captive women in Rome is a stark reminder of the human cost of empire. It highlights a society where power was absolute, and where the line between person and property could be cruelly and officially erased. It's a somber chapter in history, but one we must remember to fully grasp the world the Romans built. Have you ever heard a number so staggering it stops you in your tracks? For me, one of those numbers is 25,000. specifically 25,000 women. This figure pops up in historical accounts, often tied to the aftermath of great battles and conquests in the ancient world. But what does it really mean? Is it a literal head count, or is there something deeper going on? Let's explore this together. When we see 25,000 women captured, it's not just a statistic. It's a symbol. It's a way for ancient writers to convey an almost unimaginable scale of human tragedy. Think about it. After a massive siege or a decisive battle where an entire city fell, how would you even begin to count the number of captives? The logistics would be a nightmare. So, ancient historians often used these large, rounded numbers to paint a picture for their readers. It was their way of saying, this was a catastrophe of epic proportions. The number itself becomes a shorthand for overwhelming loss and the complete subjugation of a people. It's crucial to understand that this figure wasn't a one-time event. While 25,000 is a powerful number, some campaigns likely resulted in even more captives. We have records from various sources, Roman, Greek, Assyrian, that mention tens of thousands, sometimes even hundreds of thousands of people being displaced, enslaved, or killed after a conquest. The problem is, these records are often incomplete, fragmented, or written with a specific agenda in mind. A victorious general might inflate the numbers to make his victory seem even more glorious back home. A historian might use a large figure to emphasize the brutality of an enemy. So, while the exact number might be debatable, the reality it represents is not. These massive captures were a recurring feature of ancient warfare. It wasn't just one city that suffered this fate. It happened again and again, across different empires and over centuries. Each time a city fell, a similar story unfolded. Men were often killed, and women and children were taken as spoils of war. Their lives were forever altered. They were torn from their homes, separated from their families, and forced into servitude in a foreign land. This is why the number 25,000 is so haunting. It's a stark reminder of the immense human cost of ancient imperialism. It forces us to look beyond the tales of heroic generals and brilliant strategies and confront the devastating impact these wars had on ordinary people. It represents not just one tragedy, but a pattern of tragedy repeated across generations. It's the story of countless individuals whose names we'll never know, but whose suffering is encapsulated in this single, symbolic number. Thinking about this helps us appreciate the sheer scale of displacement and suffering that underpinned the growth of many ancient empires. The wealth, the monuments, the very foundations of these powerful states were often built on the backs of captives. The number 25,000 is more than just data. It's a window into the brutal reality of the ancient world. It reminds us that behind every grand historical narrative, there are countless personal stories of loss, survival, and resilience. It's a heavy thought, but an important one for understanding our shared past. Thanks for joining me on this. Imagine being captured, your entire world turned upside down in an instant. The life you knew is gone, replaced by a brutal and uncertain future. For countless women throughout history, this terrifying moment was just the beginning of an even more harrowing ordeal, a forced march into the unknown. This wasn't just a war. It was a grueling test of human endurance, a journey that would break many and forever change those who survived. Let's step back in time and try to understand the sheer scale of this trauma. After capture, these women, already in shock and separated from their families, were herded together. They were often forced to walk for days, weeks, even months. The distances were immense, stretching across hundreds of miles of unforgiving terrain. They faced scorching deserts, dense forests, and treacherous mountains, all while wearing inadequate clothing and often with no shoes at all. The physical toll was immediate and devastating. Exhaustion was a constant companion. Imagine the ache in your muscles, the blisters on your feet turning into open sores, the relentless sun beating down on you, or the biting cold seeping into your bones. Food and water were scarce, barely enough to keep them alive. Malnutrition and dehydration became rampant, weakening their bodies and making them vulnerable to disease. Many women were already injured from the initial capture, and these wounds went untreated, festering and causing unimaginable pain with every step. The guards who oversaw these marches were often indifferent, if not outright cruel. Their job was to move the group forward as quickly as possible. There was little to no compassion for the sick or the weak. If someone stumbled or slowed down, they were met with threats, prods from a rifle butt, or worse, The message was clear. Keep up or be left behind. This constant pressure, this feeling of being treated as less than human, added a profound psychological weight to their physical suffering. The moments of collapse were frequent and heart-wrenching. A woman might simply run out of strength, her body giving up after days of starvation and exhaustion. She would fall to the ground, unable to get back up. Her friends or fellow captives might try to help, to pull her to her feet, but they too were weak. Often, the guards would force the group to move on, leaving the fallen woman behind to face her fate alone. Each person left behind was a stark reminder to the others of their own fragility, a specter of what could happen to them at any moment. Yet, in the midst of this darkness, something remarkable happened. Bonds were forged. Women who were complete strangers became sisters in suffering. They found strength not just within themselves, but in each other. They would share their meager rations, a crust of bread, a sip of water. They would support one another physically, literally holding each other up as they walked. They would whisper words of encouragement, share memories of home, and sing quiet songs to keep their spirits from breaking completely. This mutual support was a lifeline. It was a powerful act of defiance against the dehumanizing conditions they faced. It was a declaration that even in the face of immense cruelty, their humanity would not be extinguished. For many, the will to survive was fueled by the desire to help a friend, a sister, a mother figure they had met on this terrible journey. The simple act of holding a hand, of sharing a story, became a source of incredible resilience. The journey itself was a profound trauma, one that etched itself into the very soul of every survivor. Even for those who made it to their destination, the memories of the march, the exhaustion, the hunger, the fear, the loss of fellow captives who'd haunt them for the rest of their lives. It was a life-altering experience that reshaped their understanding of the world and their place in it. They had witnessed the depths of human cruelty, but had also experienced the heights of compassion and solidarity. Understanding these forced marches is crucial to grasping the full scope of what these women endured. It wasn't just about the destination. It was about the journey that stripped them of everything. It also revealed the incredible strength of the human spirit. Their stories of survival are a powerful testament to resilience, courage, and the Imagine waking up one day, and the people you love most are just gone. Not because of a fight, not because they moved away, but because they were forcibly taken from you. This wasn't a rare occurrence in certain chapters of history. It was a systematic, brutal reality for countless families. Today, we're going to talk about one of the deepest, most enduring wounds that can be inflicted on a society: the forced separation of families. It's a heavy topic, but understanding it is crucial to understanding our shared human story. Think about the bond between a mother and her child. It's one of the most fundamental connections in nature. Now, picture that bond being shattered. Children, sometimes just toddlers, were literally pulled from their mother's arms. The screams, the confusion, the sheer terror in those moments are almost impossible for us to truly comprehend. These mothers were left with an emptiness, a phantom limb of loss that would ache for the rest of their lives. They would spend years, even decades, searching, hoping for a miracle, replaying that final, traumatic moment over and over in their minds. And it wasn't just mothers and children, sisters who had grown up sharing every secret, brothers who were each other's protectors. They were torn apart, sent to different places, often with no information about where the other had gone. Imagine your sibling, your best friend, vanishing without a trace. You wouldn't know if they were safe, if they were hungry, if they were even alive. The shared memories, the inside jokes, the promises to always be there for each other, all of it suspended in a painful unending ceiling. For many wives, the disappearance of a husband was a sudden and permanent void. One day, he'd go to work or be taken from the home, and he would never return. There were no goodbyes, no final words, no explanation, just an absence that echoed through every corner of the house. These women were left to fend for themselves and their children in a world that had suddenly become hostile and uncertain, all while carrying the heavy burden of not knowing their partner's fate. Was he suffering? Was he thinking of them? The not knowing was a unique and relentless form of torture. What made this tragedy so absolute was the lack of any system for reunification. There were no records kept, no lists, no designated offices where you could go to find your loved ones. It was intentional chaos. Once a family was broken apart, The pieces were scattered so far and wide that putting them back together was virtually impossible. It was like trying to reassemble a shattered mirror in the dark. The chances of finding a family member were infinitesimally small. For the vast majority, once they were separated, they never saw each other again. This wasn't a temporary hardship. It was a life sentence of grief. Loss became a permanent companion, a shadow that followed them every single day. Every birthday, every holiday, was a painful reminder of who was missing. Joy was always tinged with sadness. Survivors often spoke of feeling like a part of their soul had been amputated. They carried on. They built new lives. But the hole left by their lost family members never truly healed. It's a testament to the human spirit that people could endure such profound and permanent loss. But it's a wound that scarred entire generations. Understanding this history is not about dwelling on the pain, but about recognizing the profound importance of family and the devastating consequences when those bonds are intentionally destroyed. It reminds us to cherish the people we have and to stand against any ideology that seeks to tear families apart. Thank you for watching and for taking the time to understand this difficult but important part of our history. If you found this video meaningful, please consider subscribing for more deep dives into the stories that have shaped our world. We'll see you in the next one.